Hi, this is Bob Papa, voice of the New York Football Giants, and this is the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast.
Welcome back, Giants fans, to the latest edition of the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast, proudly in association with Andy's Man Club. As always, please remember it's okay to talk. In this episode, I am 100% British, but obviously still 100% Giants. Now, as you can see, it is me by myself this evening, and this is a pre-recorded episode. Now, unfortunately, Kev has joined Dan and Shane in having to work this evening, so we were determined to get something out. And this is our kind of solution. So please do enjoy this pre-recorded episode. Now, I've had the pleasure of talking to two guests for this episode that we're going to play during it. Firstly, we have the Panthers Magpie, who will be giving us the Panther perspective on what to expect this weekend. And then we have friend of the pod, Irish NFL shows, Brian O'Leary, who will be joining me to chat about the Giants for the first time this season. Now, before we begin, if you are watching this on YouTube, please do let us know what you thought in the comments and subscribe if you haven't already. Plus, give this episode a big thumbs up and ring that notification bell if you want to know when we are releasing new videos or going live. Right, so let's get this show on the road with my chat with the Panthers Magpie coming up now. Right. So, welcome to the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast. We have Keg, aka the Panthers Magpie. How you doing, mate? You good?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to having this chat.
Yes. So, obviously, this coming weekend we have the Giants versus the Panthers in Munich at the Allianz Arena. Two similar stories for the season. Probably not what the German fans wanted at the beginning of the season when they saw the teams coming over, and it's kind of gone the way that maybe they feared. But we'll start where we always start, Keg. So, why the Panthers?
The Panthers story for me started, I believe, 13 years ago. 13 years ago. I just started to get into the NFL because I'd always wanted to. And this was about 2011, where the NFL isn't or wasn't as accessible as it is now. Like, it wasn't as big as it was like in the UK, Germany, in the rest of Europe. You only really got like the prime time games, like the 1 o'clock in the morning games. So it was quite difficult to kind of build momentum, like getting into the games at that time. So yeah, I grew up like watching like a lot of like American sports and American like sport movies as well. So I grew up as a big fan of like basketball, but all of like the movies I watched growing up regarding football, I just always thought it looked really interesting and different and just cool. Just nothing like we had over here. So yeah, I wanted to get into it for years and years, but never really had a means into it until a random late night in February 2011. I was up and I was just on Twitter and the Super Bowl was trending. So I had a watch of put the telly on, had a little look, see what was going on. And that was the Packers and Steelers Super Bowl. So that was the first game that I actually got to watch. And I fell in love with it straight from there. Like, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what the rules were or what the hell was going on. But I was fascinated from there. So yeah, that was the back end of the 2010 season, that Super Bowl 2010. So 2011, I started to watch a few more games, try to get knowledge up and understanding of the rules and whatnot. So yeah, I felt like the best way to follow the sport really and kind of understand the rules, because I wasn't really getting it. Like, they're so complex to like football or basketball or anything like that. It's a very unique sport. So yeah, I thought the best way to do that would be to follow a team. So yeah, I wanted to follow a team, and the first team that I wanted to support was the Packers, because I watched them in the Super Bowl, and I loved Clay Matthews, and I loved like Aaron Rodgers, and I just really enjoyed that game and that team. But coming from the UK, our saying is glory seeker. over in the States, that would translate roughly to a bandwagon fan. And I didn't want to be a glory seeker or a bandwagon fan. Like, I grew up as a Newcastle United fan where things are going pretty well now, but they never did, like, back when I was growing up. So, but I always liked that, and I always appreciated, like, underdog mentality. I felt like as a Newcastle fan, like, you always appreciated every win, and nothing was just kind of given to you. Like growing up, like Man United were like the dominant team. Like when I was growing up, like I couldn't. And you've got Manchester City now. Like, I just feel like their fans probably don't appreciate wins as much as what like Newcastle fans would, because we savour every one, whereas they win, it's just like, oh well, it's another win next week, whatever. So yeah, I didn't like the idea of following the Super Bowl champions in Green Bay. So I had another think of other teams that I knew and other teams that I liked. And funnily enough, I've told this story countless times on podcasts, but never has it ever actually made sense. This part of the story, speaking to you, is my second team that I thought I should support is the Giants. And that was because at that time in my life, everything kind of centered around like New York City, like all of my favorite movies and TV shows and music artists and everything. And New York's New York. Like it's a brilliant city, a lot to do. Like it's very publicized. It's big in stature and I say advertised in movies and TVs and whatnot. But yeah, going back to that glory seeker thing, at that time, I knew the Giants, as little as I knew about the NFL, I knew the Giants were a good team back then, and Eli Manning was one of the top quarterbacks in the league. So I decided not to go down the Giants route. And as you, I'm sure, well know, the 2011 season, the first year that I'm starting to watch football as a fan, you won the Super Bowl. So trying not to be a glory seeker, if I decide to be a Giants fan and won the Super Bowl in my very first year watching it, it just wouldn't have sat well with me. And that, so yeah, going back to the drawing board, the third team that I thought of was Carolina. And that is because dating back to about the late 90s, I'm about 7 years old. My cousin, his dad lived in America. So when we were little, he was a bit older than me, so he'd been about 14. I was about 7. Yeah, he went over to visit his dad, brought me back a ton of stuff, like South Park and Space Jam, like Looney Tunes type like toys and stuff like that. But he also brought back a signed Brett Favre football, which up until a few years ago, I didn't know who the squiggle belonged to. It was just a squiggle on a ball as far as I was concerned. I didn't know who Brett Favre was. But yeah, he also brought back the full Carolina Panthers uniform, including shoulder pads, helmet, the jersey, the pants, and everything. And yeah, I loved that stuff growing up. I didn't know what really to do with it. I was running around with my Brett Favre football, essentially playing rugby, because again, I didn't really know what football was back then. So yeah, so the Panthers came into mind, and it's funny because my cousin's dad, now I know, actually lives on the outskirts of Atlanta. So with this being probably around about 98, maybe 99, Carolina only entered the NFL in 95. So like a 4-year-old franchise coming from the outskirts of Atlanta. To this day, I couldn't tell you where he got that stuff from or why it came back with him in his suitcase for me. But yeah, so yeah, I thought of Carolina, and I liked that I didn't really know a lot about them, because I've seen like Giants are a big fan base. They're a recognizable logo. I've seen it in movies. Or I remember growing up, Stuart Little had it on a t-shirt, and I knew who like the Raiders and the Cowboys and Dolphins, Ace Ventura, like 49ers, like the Jets, like all these big franchises that are recognizable that you could see even down Newcastle High Street in the noughties. You would see people wearing a jersey or a hoodie or a cap or something like that, and you'd recognize it and say, oh, that's an NFL team. Or maybe it's even a reference on Sky Sports News if that was a big story to be told. But yeah, never ever in that time from late 90s up until 2011 had I seen, heard anything in the media about the Carolina Panthers, and I found that very interesting. So that sparked my attention straight away. But yeah, I didn't know if they even existed, to be honest with you. So I like I said, I'd never heard of them. So I had to go to Google and say, like, are the Carolina Panthers an active NFL franchise? Because there could have been a college team or like an XFL team, or could have been fictional, like the Mighty Ducks or the Toon Squad. I'd had no idea. So yeah, Google said that, yeah, the the play in the NFL. And I was like, all right, I don't need to go any further. I'm not going to jump and change. I've already gone from the Packers to the Giants. I've made my mind up. The anonymity is selling it. How little I know about Carolina. I don't even know where Carolina is. I didn't know where Charlotte was. So, yeah, that sold it pretty much for me. So I was like, right, Panthers fan, that's it. Now I'm going to do some research, get my knowledge up, find out who's on the team, how good, how bad they are. Sorry, my flag's falling down in the background. And yeah, obviously that was after the 2010 season where we were actually the worst team in the league. So I was like, all right, cool. Yeah, I know I purposely didn't want the best team in the league, but I didn't necessarily want the worst team in the league either. But I was like, nah, it's all right. I'm used to rubbish sports anyway, so I'll stick with Carolina. And obviously, this is being the 2011 season, we had a rookie. He was picked number 1 overall in the 2011 NFL draft, and his name was Cam Newton. He was throwing the ball to 89, Steve Smith, and he was running and blasting all these rookie records by running and throwing and just so athletic and dynamic. And I was like, that's it. That's me. I'm all about that. So, yeah, that was it pretty much. Like 2011 rookie Cam Newton and the anonymity of the Carolina Panthers sold it for me back then. And I'm almost 14 years deep and I've never looked back since.
Amazing. So you sort of touched about the fact that they weren't a great team back then. It's been a rough start this year. All signs pointing towards this being a 7th straight losing season. What's the general feeling amongst the fan base about how the season has gone? Because obviously you do have a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator, so you're not likely to hit the ground running. But has it been surprisingly poor, or is it kind of expected because of the teething problems?
A real mix. It's been a bit of a strange year as a Carolina Panthers fan, like in and amongst the Carolina Panthers fan base, because there was some level of expectancy, but also no expectancy at the same time. And it stems from last year, really. Like, we were the worst team in the league last year, 2-15 record, and didn't even have the number 1 overall pick to show for it. So, yeah, last year was so much worse in so many ways because we felt really good last year. Like, we were aggressive in going up to number 1 to get our quarterback of the future and Bryce Young. And we felt like all the other pieces of the team were in place. We got a veteran head coach in Frank Reich to come in, and he built what seemed on paper a superstar backroom staff. So we had so much expectancy going into 2023. And to end up 2-15 just was not on our radar at all. So last year was an absolute train wreck. Bryce didn't really play his best, but also it was at the fault of Scott Fitterer, the general manager, and Frank Reich for not giving him a solid enough offensive line and solid enough play calling and any good receivers. So, yeah, this year we kind of went back to basics. We changed everybody up. We got Dan Morgan as our new general manager, Dave Canales as a first-year head coach, and first-year general manager, I suppose, for Dan Morgan as well. So 2 inexperienced people to change the fortunes of this team, which is going to take time. Like, as far as this season goes, yeah, it's been disappointing and we've seen some terrible football, but we kind of expected it, to be honest. Like, we can't really say we're too surprised. There's been some ups and downs. We've had a ton of injuries, just as we did last year. Bryce was benched and now he's back. So it's been a bit of a weird season, but to be honest, like, it's been okay. Like, last season, in 18 weeks, we won 2 games. So far, we're at the midway point now. We've just come off of week 9 and got our second win. So we've got as many wins at the halfway mark this year than we did last year. And we've just gone past the trade deadline. We've let go of some guys that we didn't see a future with. Bryce is back in, and after 5 weeks of being benched, is looking quite good. We've got a ton of rookies who we're so excited about. Xavier Liga was our first rounder this year, and an undrafted free agent in Jalen Coker is looking very, very good. 4th round tight end from Texas, Jadavion Sanders, playing very, very well. We're 2nd round Texas running back. Jonathan Brooks is expected to be announced to be back for this week. So the future's looking bright. The old line's holding up. We went and spent $152 million on the first day of free agency on a couple of new guards. we're playing with the top 10 O-line right now. So, yeah, play calling and management could still be questioned, but I say Dave Canales is in year 1, Dan Morgan's in year 1. So it's not that doom and gloom, to be honest with you. It's okay. It's not great. We're not happy, but going forward for the future, I mean, it is looking bright, to be honest with you. So yeah, going forward, if we can keep on getting another couple of wins this year, get another round of free agency and draft and turn things around, then yeah, it's okay. We're looking good right now.
So you kind of touched on it, but the Panthers obviously traded away Jonathan Mingo this literally yesterday, trade deadline
Yeah,
day.
yesterday. Yeah.
The week before Deontay Johnson, that didn't work. Obviously, he came in as a free agent in the off season and has now departed already. Neither really set the world alight for you. So
Mhm.
I guess in a way you wouldn't miss them. And obviously you've already mentioned one of my favourite rookies in the entire class in Xavier Legend. I think he's absolutely brilliant, both on and off the field. Just any kind of content with him is well worth watching, just for the
Yeah,
accent.
definitely.
How do you think losing those two players will affect your receiving core this season?
I'll start with Mingo and not at all, to be quite brutal with you. He was second round pick last year, 39th overall. Yeah, it weren't great. Like I say, last year wasn't great, and I was open to letting him have the benefit of the doubt for a second year, just as we did with Bryce Young.
Mm.
Bad situation, bad coaching, bad play calling, bad O-line, not great quarterback play. So a receiver can only do so much, but he only had about 500 yards and no touchdowns. In fact, he was our second leading receiver, I believe. But if you total up the sack yards lost by Bryce Young, them numbers equate more than what Jonathan Mingo's receiving yards were. So yeah, it wasn't great. And yeah, touching in on 2024, he probably started off as our third, like he's probably WR3 behind Johnson and Thielen, just letting Leggett just kind of sit behind us, probably WR4, give him time. But as the weeks have gone on, even with Adam Thielen on IR, Mingo's targeting has just gone down and down and down and down. Like his snap count's gone down and down. Any targets that he's been getting, he hasn't been catching. So yeah, he was a bit of a busted second round pick, to be honest with you. Best of luck to him at Dallas. Hopefully they find a developmental player in him and can help his progression. But yeah, with the rise of not just Xavier Liga to we expected, but with undrafted rookie Jalen Coker taking over and Jatavian Sanders looking really good in the past game as well. Mingo, he was looking down and out, to be honest. Even David Moore was getting more targets than what Mingo was. So I can't see him being a miss, to be honest with you. Not when Thielen comes back off IR. Not at all. With Johnson, though, it's a bit of a strange one with him because, yeah, we brought him in, traded away, not a lot for him, just to come in. It's a bit of a moneyball signing for me because last year, one of the biggest problems with the wide receiving group was separation. Like Bryce Young was just thrown to tight targets. Like nobody could get open. There was zero separation. So the moneyball aspect of getting Johnson is statistically over his first 4 years in the league, he was in the top 3 in terms of his route running ability and separation ability. I think the year before was his fourth year, was his 5th year in the league, and I think he's like 12th in the league in terms of separation. But between them first 4 years, he alternated between first, second, and third place. So that was a good business, I would say, to get someone like him. Like he's not like a star receiver. He's not really going to be anybody's number one by any means. But for what we needed, it was a very good pickup, and he was doing the job. I mean, he still currently holds the lead in terms of targets, catches, yards. Just this weekend, Xavier Leggett's overtaken him in touchdown catches. So he were tied on 3 before this weekend, but Leggett's at the weekend put him up to 4. But it's more of like a issue that we were warned about by Steelers fans in the offseason, like about his personality, like his character. Like he's a bit of a dick. He's just one of them kind of locker room guys that's going to stir the pot, and just he's not a very good teammate. And I think everybody in the organization knew it. And he's on the last year of his contract, so it was a situation where we're either going to lose him in the off season, or we would have had to sign him to a big contract. So, do you really want either of them? Not really. And if he's upsetting the dressing room, if he's being this big ego, then just get rid. And that's the situation that we're in. Like, people look at the draft capital that we got for him and can criticize Dan Morgan and say, "Oh, we didn't really get anything for him," but we weren't going to get anything from him in the offseason either. And we're quite happy with Liga and Coker and Sanders. Like, yeah, he's going to be a tough one to miss, especially with Bryce. He was pretty much brought in with Bryce in mind to have that route running expert, one of the best in the league in terms of separation. Yeah, it's going to be sad to miss him, but it's probably a good thing in the long run. I think we got something for him instead of getting nothing for him. So yeah, they're probably both positives with eyes towards the future, getting Liga and Coker as many snaps as possible.
So if we have a look at the other side of the ball, look at the defense. I was looking at the stats earlier, and they don't read well. You're the worst. You're the worst rushing defense in the league, and overall, you're pretty much in the top 5 for most of the sort of, or so we say, bottom 5 for most of the defensive stats. They give up almost 400 yards a game, just under 400 yards a game, 3.5 touchdowns a game so far this season as well. Is there a specific reason that you can kind of point to for the defensive struggles?
Probably a couple, really. A couple of them being probably Derek Brown got injured in week 1. Like, he broke the record for defensive tackles or tackles by a defensive tackle in NFL history last year with, I think, 103. The previous record was just under 100. He surpassed 100. Run stop animal. Him going out for the season in week 1 was a huge ball buster because he signed a big 5-year, big money contract in the off season. Yeah, losing him in the first game was just awful. So that's one problem. Another could be other injuries. Like, we haven't really had the rub of the green with injuries. 2 main linebackers, Shaq Thompson, one of the captains on our defense, middle linebacker, experience, very good at the run stop, very experienced, like I say, leader. He went out in, I think, about week 3. He's done for the season. He done that last year as well. I think he only played one of the first 2 or 3 games and got done for the season. So that's unfortunate that we've lost him. Josie Jewell alongside him, I think he missed about 3 or 4 games at middle linebacker. So we've been playing with rookies and rotationals, guys being elevated off the practice squad to come in. Safety's been another issue. On the edge has been an issue. So yeah, we just haven't really had the right personnel. Like, was the personnel there at the beginning of the season? Like, if you looked at our strongest starting defense, was it even good enough to begin with? Questionable. But when you start losing guys, like almost all of them to injuries, long-term injuries, it does not help. Especially with Derek Brown week 1, he just set the tone, and that just didn't work well at all. The defensive structure, the coordinator who got so much praise last year, Ejiro Evero, in 2022 he was with the Broncos, who had a bad year, but they were still ranked as a top 10 defense. Even in 2023, when the Carolina only won 2 games, were ranked within the top 5 in terms of yards allowed, because Ejiro Evero was just seeming to be this absolute defensive coordinator demon, just getting the best out of even last year with injuries. We had so many injuries, and we're still like picking guys up off the street, like practice squad elevations, and people were coming through and playing really well on defense. But this year, it is just not working. I don't really like Evero's scheme. Like, I like Evero, and I don't want him to go. He's been one of the main guys in the head coaching cycle for the past 2 years. I'm really surprised that he's here for a second year, to be honest with you. I thought he would have been snapped up, but we're getting him. And I was really, really happy that we got him, because I thought he was going to be a key piece. But yeah, I just don't really believe in his system, and he doesn't really change it up as much, because we play with like a 3-4 base defense where we've got the 3 defensive linemen, with the outside linebackers, where I don't really think it worked too well for Brian Burns last year, because Brian Burns is like a pure pass rusher, defensive end. Like, he's not really an outside linebacker. Like, he had to learn that position to suit Evero's system last year, and that's why his sack production went down from, I think it was 16.5 in 22 down to 8 in 23. And yeah, we don't pass rush too much. It's mostly about run stop, which we've done last year. Why not this year? So yeah, he's neglected the pass rush to focus on run stop, but that's not working. You haven't got Derek Brown. You haven't got your stalwart defensive tackle making 100 sacks a season, 100 tackles a season. Sorry. So he should be changing up the scheme to make it fit the personnel that we've got, and he hasn't been. So yeah, it's just been a bit of a mess, really. Like, we haven't got the right guys either on the field. I don't want to slag Ezra Everett too much, because I think he is a good coach, but he should be switching it up. He should be playing to our strengths. But on the flip side, are our strengths even strengths? Like, it's just hard to really call at this point for Carolina this year. It's just been an absolute car crash on defense.
Right. So obviously we're not a great team as it stands. We have had a lot of close games though, and have been kind of unlucky. And 2-7 could be maybe construed as harsh. How do you see this weekend's game going, and what's your score prediction?
Yeah, it's a tough one, man. Because neither one of us is really doing too well right now. I think you're on a 5-game losing streak. Am I right in saying that? Yeah. I feel like we should be probably the more confident of the two, like coming off that win last week against a divisional rival. It was a big win for us. I know the Saints are on a 7-game losing streak, so it's not too much to brag about. But when you're Carolina, that's only won 3 games in 2 years, any win's a good win. So yeah, I think, and Bryce played really well as well. So I think we have got that confidence. And we're probably going to have about 5 guys coming back off IR who's had their practice windows open for the last 2-3 weeks. So they need to be elevated before this game. So yeah, we've got 5 guys coming back, including Jonathan Brooks, Adam Thielen, Jordan Fuller. I can't even remember who else, a couple more guys. So yeah, I feel like momentum should be with us. So I don't want to say confident, because I'm never confident with Carolina, but more optimistic than I've been in 2 years. So, but to say that it doesn't mean at all we're going to win. I really have not got a clue how this game's going to go, because you haven't had the best of seasons, had some inconsistencies. Sometimes you look good on defense, sometimes you don't. Same with offense. Daniel Jones sometimes plays well, sometimes he looks absolutely terrible. And you've got Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence. I love Malik Neighbors. He's doing really well for himself. So I've got no clue, to be honest with you. I'd love to give you a prediction. I'll sway with the bias and say a Carolina win. I'm not going to give you a score prediction. It could be very high scoring or very low scoring, depending on how the game goes. Like our win at the weekend, it wasn't flattering, but we got the win. It was 23-22, 1 point in it. I could see it again going a similar way to either team. Obviously, I'm going to lean in Carolina's way, but if it's a 1-2 score game, either way, I can see that happening.
Awesome. So, thanks for kind of joining me this evening and sort of putting this out. We've done this for every team so far this season, and it's worked really well. Now, before you go, just plug your stuff to the guys who are listening.
Yeah, will do. Thank you very much for having me on. I much appreciate the opportunity. My name is Keg, mostly known for Newcastle United content, but for the past almost 18 months, I've set up a couple of social media accounts just to build up a following for what is planned in the future. And that is all things to do with Carolina, social media, YouTube, all that stuff. So currently, we're just on Twitter and Instagram at the Panthers Magpie. So for all of your Carolina Panthers content, head over there for all the latest news.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll hopefully speak soon.
Yeah, hopefully. Best of luck for the weekend.
Thank you to the Panthers Magpie for joining me there for an interesting chat about the Panthers, and some good points brought up there. It is going to be an interesting game for sure. Now, If we have a look ahead to Sunday's trip to Munich, it's the Giants' fourth overseas regular season game, with the Giants currently sitting at 3-0 when playing in the international series. Obviously, there was the one in 2007 at Wembley. You had the one in 2016 at Twickenham, and the one in 2022 at Tottenham. So they've played in our nation's capital of London 3 times at 3 different stadiums and won all 3 times. Now, they're also not strangers to Germany, having actually played a preseason game there 30 years ago in 1994. It was against the then San Diego Chargers in a game that the Giants won 28-20, despite the fact it obviously meant nothing because it was a preseason game. But it does show that the Giants have been to Germany before. Now, Sunday's game against the Panthers is the 13th matchup between the 2 teams, and bear in mind that the Panthers were an expansion team in 1995, so there hasn't been many years for us to meet each other. The regular season is currently tied at 6-6, and the Panthers do hold a 1-0 record against the Giants in the postseason. The last meeting ended 19-16 to the Giants with a Daniel Bellinger touchdown and 4 Graham Gano field goals. Now, bear in mind, Gano is an ex-Panther himself. So that was a good little win in our 2022 season. Probably the last time that we were happy to. Unfortunately, the game could be a battle for last place in the NFC, with the game taking place prior to the rest of the bottom tier NFC teams playing. The Giants are currently favoured in the game, which is for the first time in 24 games that we have not been the underdog in a game. Now, the line for this game is either the Giants being favoured by 4.5 or 5.5, depending on your bookmaker. But that does show that bookmakers do believe that despite the Giants' shortcomings this season, they are the more likely to win and are obviously favoured. So I think the over-under is around the 40 mark range, which is incredible considering neither team have really been consistently putting up big points. So one to watch. Now, earlier today, I was able to speak to Brian from the Irish NFL show, who is obviously a friend of the pod, about our Giants and what he makes of the season so far. So please enjoy that now. Right, so as part of this weird and wonderful episode that we're podging a little bit together, we have Brian from the Irish NFL show joining me to chat Giants. Now, for those that don't know, me and Brian talk quite a lot anyway, so we probably know what each other's going to say. But thanks for coming on, Brian.
Absolutely, pleasure. We've taken time out to come on with you guys. Obviously, just yourself in this instance, Craig. But yeah, there's a lot to unwrap for a team that is 2-7 and going to Munich this weekend against a team that's playing against a team that's also struggling.
Yeah, so before we kind of get into this weekend's game against the Panthers, we'll have a quick chat about the season so far, and with all the fanfare of Hard Knocks, the Burns trade, free agency, the draft, neighbours, it's not lived up to the hype at all. How do you break down what's happened so far for the Giants?
I suppose a lot of it is down to the inconsistency on offense. I think by and large the defense has played quite well over the course of the season. I know last Sunday against the Commanders they have won their lesser games, but by and large we've seen a good reaction to this team coming in under a new defensive coordinator in Shane Bowen, and I think there was people that had question marks about him at the start of the season. But by and large, I think Brian Burton's gradually got up to speed, and we could see the merits of why they made that trade last off season. Some other players who we expected maybe to jump up in their second season, Deontay Banks, for example, #1 selection in the draft previously, hasn't played up to the level of expectation we've seen him taking out of a couple of games. But ultimately, this season was always going to be about Daniel Jones, and Daniel Jones is the answer at quarterback. And I think, by and large, most Giants fans have come to a decision he isn't the answer, and they were comfortable enough in the sense of this would be his last year. But I think we've seen over the course of the 7 to 8 weeks, with the exception of maybe some games, he played really well in Seattle. He played well for large parts of the Cleveland game, in which he won both games. And even in other games, even last Sunday, for example, despite the loss, he played quite well for large parts. He's just not at the level in which we need for him to take this team on to the next level. And this season for me was going to be around Brian Dable coming in as the offensive coordinator stroke head coach, this was his opportunity to put his stamp on this offense. And we all felt that the team would be better for it, but it hasn't transpired that way. The offense has gone backwards to a large extent. Monique Neighbours obviously has been a standout player in the sense that we saw early on how good of a selection he is, and I still think there's brighter days ahead. He hasn't been at the same level since he came back from the concussion, but Tyrone Tracy, 5th round pick, has stood up. So there is positives in the offense, but ultimately it's down to the play, the quarterback, and the inconsistencies are still there. And ultimately, I think Giants fans are kind of resigned themselves now to the fact that this season is the last season. If they were to lose on Sunday, I think we could see quite a shift in terms of the fanfare and what fans' expectation is of the GM and the head coach, because we've seen this week the Saints lose to the Panthers, and straight away they said, right, that's just not clearly good enough, and we've made a decision to move on from our head coach. And we've seen over the course of the last 6 years where John Mara has said a head coach is fine, his job is secure, but there's always this turning point. And Sunday could be the turning point. If they were to lose to a lowly Panthers team, I think the fans would start to kind of see it in a different manner. And so despite the 2-7 record, there's a lot of reasons why they have to win this game on Sunday.
It's the dreaded sort of kiss of death, isn't it? The vote of confidence that was given by Mara. So, it's going to be an interesting game. I mean, if we look ahead to the Panthers defense ranks in the bottom 5 in most categories, including rock bottom in rushing yards allowed. Now, despite the Giants having to abandon the run game often because they're behind and they need to obviously start passing, they can't afford to chew unnecessary clock. Tyrone Tracy's been kind of a bright spark on offense and is now what we could probably call the de facto lead back for the Giants. Do you think this is the kind of game where we maybe lean on the rookie a bit more?
Well, it should be, because the nature of how Tyrone Tracy has played over the course of the last 2 games in particular, and we saw it in the Bengals game on the Sunday Night Football, he's able to go up and down the field on teams. We saw a Steelers defense, which was ranked 2 against the rush, and he put up 170-odd yards in that game. Big numbers on Sunday. And they were consistently running the ball effectively last Sunday, and then they got away from it on a huge drive, which led to the fumble. And obviously, I suppose the game kind of spiraled from there. But he has been the leading light, 5th round pick. People are already suggesting he's the bell cow going forward. He's taken over from Singletary. People are saying there's brighter days ahead in terms of he could be the number 1 running back next season. And you could argue, despite the performance of Saquon Barkley, this is why Joe Shea made his decision, because there is gems in the draft to running back. And a 5th round pick that now could become the stellar number 1 running back for the team kind of signifies exactly why he went and did this deal in terms of moving away from Saquon Barkley. In terms of the game itself, you would assume Dable looks at this and says, right, this is the weakest spot of this Panthers team. We need to rush. We need to run the game, have a balanced offense, and allow for Daniel Jones even to use his legs, which we saw effectively on Sunday. So there should be a number of different components to the run game. So they shouldn't necessarily be all on Tyrone Tracy. We should be seeing run pass options with Daniel Jones, boarding it up as well with yards. But again, sometimes Dable, we didn't think he'd run the ball effectively in Pittsburgh because their defense was so well. We thought he'd throw more. He runs the ball. We saw last Sunday it was quite balanced. So I'd like to think on Sunday, and he'll start the game with the run, see how effective he can be, and if it continues, we'll then lean on it, and then ultimately you get yourself into a situation where you can start to have some pass plays or effective pass plays down the field to Theo Johnson and Monique Neighbours.
And we saw that obviously this weekend with the touchdown to Johnson, and I mean he had a couple of drops as well, but they were able to open up a little bit more. But going back to that Washington game and sort of talking about Daniel Jones, it was a better second half for him against Washington, but that first half the Giants only allowed him to pass 6 times. Apart from that, it was very run heavy. Do you think that was game plan against the Commanders, or do you think that's a sign that Dable maybe doesn't trust him?
I think it was more the game plan. I think if you look at the Commanders, despite the successful season they've had, they have allowed teams to run the ball, and the Giants ran the ball effectively in week 2 against them. Obviously, we came at the wrong side of that game as well. Singletary had a really productive game that night, with the exception of that fumble in the second half, which you could argue was probably the most costliest play of the game. We looked like we were in striking distance to score again. And they did it that day effectively. So I imagine he looked at the tape of that game and said, yeah, we can go and do this again. And then they've probably looked at other teams over the course of the last few weeks. I mean, the game the previous week for the Commanders, they were dominant against the Bears, and yet the Bears then exploded in the second half with a 56-yard running touchdown from DeAndre Swift. And it kind of spiraled from there, and the Bears were able to get up to speed, running the ball effectively. It has happened. So for a team to be 7-2 and yet allowing teams to run the ball on them, it kind of strikes me as why Dable went heavy. But then you get yourself into a situation where you're allowing a touchdown on the stroke of half time. You're down 21-7, and you have to pivot. You've got to get away from the run game in the second half. You've got to try to use the clock to your advantage, and that's why they came out, I imagine, throwing heavy in the second half. And they got themselves back into the game. It wasn't for some dubious refereeing decisions. We would have been a lot closer and an opportunity to win the game. But the run game is there. It's working. But on Sunday, it's going to have to be about, over the course of 4 quarters, it has to be some kind of striker balance. You can't get him to run the ball effectively for 4 quarters. At some stage, you think the Panthers will be able to have in-game adjustment to stop that. It's whether then Daniel Jones can take over and throw the ball effectively and win the game.
If you look at the Panthers' sort of passing defense, it's not awful, but it's like I said, in the bottom 5 there. We're slowly starting to get our way around that. Is this the sort of game where we could also look at players like Malik Neighbours to maybe explode this offense a little bit? Like, this is almost like a get-right game, isn't it? I know that's disrespectful to the Panthers, and they could quite easily see us as kind of a get-right game, but one of these teams needs to have a good showing offensively.
I feel like it's one of those games where they should be saying, all bets are off. Let's go with the most expansive offensive performance we've had all season. Let's try the plans. Let's put ourselves in a position, because it's not the kind of game that, touch wood, it's not the kind of game they're going to get blown out. Like, we've seen games against the Eagles and other various different teams over the course of the season. The Giants can do their utmost to have an effective play calling situation offensively, but they're up against an upper level team and they'll get taken care of and beaten. And they've been in most games by and large. This game doesn't strike me as the kind of game that will get out of hand. So they could be trying different things in the first half. But I do believe we have to get Malik Neighbours more involved and get more involved in this game. It started off that way at the start of the season. He had the 2 touchdowns in Cleveland and he had some other marquee performances. But since the concussion, he's getting his looks. He got it on the Monday Night Football in Pittsburgh, where he had a touchdown, but he didn't come down with the ball with the 2 feet. And there was a few drops in the game. But it doesn't strike me as a guy that's, we saw the Cowboys game on Thursday Night Football where he had 12 looks, 12 catches for whatever the reception was in the hundreds. We haven't really seen that. We've got to see that on Sunday. We've got to see them make the Panthers defense think about, okay, is Malik Neighbours a real threat here today? Is a Slayton, like Robinson, is kind of tailed off slightly? We need to get these guys more involved. We need to get players over the course of the game. Ideally, what you want to do on Sunday is come out of the game winning effectively, winning by a good score. But also look at the numbers after the game and say, okay, it wasn't just Malik Neighbours. We had Slayton getting them. We have Theo Johnson, and a balanced and mixture of offensive players doing good things. Because if that's the case, and they're having to kind of combat for Theo Johnson, for Slayton, for Tyrone Tracy in the backfield, then Malik Neighbours will get his opportunities, and we've got to see some big plays down the field. I think me and you have discussed time and time again. We haven't seen numerous big plays down the field this season. We have to be seeing them Sunday. They've got to go after the secondary of the Panthers. It's a huge weak link in this team. We should be delivering. We've seen other teams, and you watch games and you say, how is that team able to go and do that against that defense? And yet when the Giants come against them, they're stifled. This Giants offense in their own way, you saw last Sunday, they scored in every drive in the second half. They should. In this game, we should be hitting 24 to 27 points in this game. We should be putting this game away against. If we don't win this game, the nature of how we play on Sunday for me is the bigger conversation. If they win a game and it's 13-10 and it's a drab affair, Giants fans will go home and say, okay, we won the game, we expected it, but it's still not at the level which we expected. It still raises the question of the coaching committee for next season. If they come out and have a comprehensive victory, we can say, okay, there is brighter days ahead for this offense. You go on a bye week, and then who knows what you've got ahead of you. Bucks, injury-prone team at the moment. Dak Prescott's out Thanksgiving. You could argue there's winnable games ahead.
So if we flip it across to the defense, we've kind of briefly touched on them, and it's definitely a tale of 2 units, I think, with the defensive pass rush being dominant, leading the league in sacks, and then our secondary has been lackluster, just allowing chunk plays, and we're not getting turnovers from them. 2 players that are really on the opposite side of the spectrum when you look at Giants fans' opinions right now are Dexter Lawrence and Deonte Banks. Dexter Lawrence is a Defensive Player of the Year candidate this year, and rightly so. Deonte Banks is having his effort and ability questioned. What are your thoughts on the 2 players there?
I'll start with the bright spot. That's Dexter Lawrence. Obviously, he's a huge favourite for the fan base, and it's frustrating for him. It's frustrating for the fan base. You see it every time you watch one of his interviews. You can't help but love the guy and love his commitment and his desire for the team. And he spoke about it last week. You knew what he was referring to in the locker room around certain players delivering 100% on the field, and he was referring to Deontay Banks in that particular play against the Eagles the previous week. Time and time again, he goes out, he makes plays, and with the players that have moved off the league over the course of last year, it's hard to say he's not the number one defensive tackle in the league. He's got the contract, he's well deserving of it, and he's the guy that makes the plays that keeps the Giants in the game. And Brian Burns and Thibodeau is obviously out injured, but Ujulari has benefited hugely from his play, because they're the ones up there getting the sacks right now. But it's all down to the pressure which is coming up the middle from Dexter. With the Deontay Banks, I was never sold on the selection originally. I thought there was other cornerbacks that were probably a little bit above his level that I felt we could have got. And we've seen some players kind of trickle down the draft that year who are actually having a more productive career so far, a more productive season. But last year we saw bright spots from Deontay Banks in games where we said, okay, we've seen enough now to understand why the Giants were sold on him. Ultimately, I think he believes he can be a shutdown cornerback, a CB1. And right now he's CB2 at best, and that's the unfortunate situation. And when you draft a player in the first round, you're expecting a shutdown corner. Not necessarily in his first year, but by the time you hit where we are now in the second year, in the middle of the second year, you would expect him to be coming up to that level. We were saying he's our marquee cornerback, and right now he's not there at all. And the problem then is you pivot to the other side. We don't really have a productive CB2 either, so that's kind of the concerning piece. Drew Phillips started off the season well, but we're seeing him start slightly coming back to the pack in terms of his production, and that's understandable. It's his year one. He's a lower end pick in the draft, but Deontay Banks needs to obviously get his head in the right place, because we've seen time and time again. And whilst people were talking about the Jalen Hurts run in particular, where he just bypassed him, there was other plays in that game, and we've seen other scenarios in different games. Pittsburgh on the Monday Night Football when he was taken out of the game. It's a huge concern. I don't know how this is going to play out, because obviously they can't move off him, but it feels like the writing on in a kind of ways on the wall. He's going to have a huge upward turn in the season for Giants fans to kind of walk away from this season going to go, he is the guy that we saw being selected number one, and we saw the merits of it. Because right now, I don't think many Giants fans would see it that way.
No, and then if we have a look at the game on Sunday, then the Giants have played 3 regular season international games and are undefeated. They've won at Wembley, they've won at Twickenham, they've won at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Do you think they can add the Allianz Arena to that list in Germany?
I do. I really think they'll win on Sunday. It's just unfortunate because we're all excited to see our team play, in close proximity. We all get to travel over to Munich on Sunday and enjoy the occasion. The previous 3 times in which the Giants come over, we didn't really know it in 2007, but they were a sneaky team who ultimately went on to win the Super Bowl. And they had a great road success that year, the Road Warriors. And then you had the team in Twickenham, once they lost in the playoffs. They made the playoffs with Eli Manning and Odell Beckham. And then we had the great success of Dable and Shane in Tottenham a couple of years ago, which led to a playoff victory in Minneapolis that year. Lose out to the Eagles in the divisional round. So those teams were on an upward trajectory those seasons. This team, unfortunately, are not. But I do think the Giants on Sunday, if you look at the spectrum of both sides this season, once they have the same record, it's clearly defined by most people in the league. The Panthers are the worst team in the league, and the Giants should go out there on Sunday and comprehensively win. But the Giants have ways of keeping poor teams in games and even find ways to throw these games away. I don't think that'll be the case on Sunday. I think to go over to Germany with the enormity of the trip they have, and the enormity of the trip back if they were to lose this game going on a bye week, and the scrutiny on Dable, the scrutiny on Joe Shane, they have to have this game on Sunday. I think the manner of the performance, though, will be more about how they play as opposed to how they win the game. I think they will win the game. I think it'll be a comprehensive victory. I think I look at the line, it's 6.5 points. It's kind of a fair reflection of both teams. I think the Giants win by 10 points plus.
Awesome. So just before you go, do you want to just let everyone know where they can find the Irish NFL show and the stuff that you do?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we go live Monday, Thursday, covering the entirety of the league. Once we have different fan bases on the show, two Bears fans, 2 Giants fans, and a Patriots fan. We cover the league in its entirety. We go live Monday across all our social platforms, and Thursday is previewing every game. Our X handle is at IRE NFL. You get us on Instagram at Irish NFL Show. We're available on YouTube. Search Irish NFL Show, and of course, we're available on every show. Is also put out in podcast format. So if you search Irish NFL Show, leave a review. It's very helpful for us. And they also leave a review for your podcast, Craig, which is also very helpful because it allows to grow the fan audiences for both the people who want to listen to the league and also the Giants coverage.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining me, Brian.
Best of luck on Sunday.
Thank you, Brian, for that chat. It was interesting to get his perspective on what he thinks of the team so far. Obviously, he is predicting a Giants win. And as you can see by the bottom of the screen, if you are watching the video version of this, it is that time of the show where we make our predictions. Now, as you can imagine, we all feel like if there is a get right game, this is the one for the Giants where they could get right. So we have gone as follows, and obviously it's only me, but I will still go through them one by one as we always would do. So Dan has gone for a 23-17 Giants win. Kev, the ever optimist, has gone for a 31-17 Giants win. Shane has also gone for a Giants win, 23-20, and that means it is a clean sweep with myself going for a 24-17 Giants win as well. Now, this is the first time we have all had a Giants win since week 1 against the Vikings, and we all know how that went. So maybe it's just the international series allure that has won us round to backing the Giants once again, or just how bad we think the Panthers are. But one thing is for sure, if we lose to this Panthers team this coming weekend, there are going to be some tough decisions and conversations going on at East Rutherford over the next week or so. So I don't know quite what that means, whether we will see the injury clause for Daniel Jones come into play there. And I mean, as Brian rightly said in the interview, we saw what happened with the Saints when they lost to the Panthers. I don't know if John Mara and Joe Shane will be quite that reactionary, but stranger things have happened. Now, if we move on to our college prospects area, so this is something we started last Thursday. Both Shane and Kev have given me their picks for who to be looking out for this week, so I will read them out for you. Shane has gone for Garrett Nussmeier, and he said it's no coincidence that me and Kev have both picked players from probably the biggest college matchup of this weekend, as number 11 Alabama hosts number 15 LSU. The player I've opted to watch in that game is a guy who's hoping to follow in the footsteps of previous LSU QBs in Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels, and that is Garrett Nussmeier. For Nussmeier to be in contention of being drafted in 2025, one of the parts of his game that I'd like to see him clean up a little bit would be his interceptions. He's thrown 9 of them this season, and last week in the defeat to Texas A&M, saw him throw the most interceptions in one game so far this season with 3. Now, he did still throw for 405 yards and 2 touchdowns, but that's the 3rd time in the last 4 games he's thrown multiple interceptions in one game. He is, however, 4th nationally in both passing yards and touchdowns, and 5th in passing yards per game. So if one thing is clear, it's that Nussmeier is not afraid to sling it around a little, and that is evident with LSU having the SEC's 2nd best passing offense. Now, while Alabama aren't the Nick Saban Alabama of old, they still produce players that are NFL ready, ignoring Evan Neal, and they do have a fairly young secondary, and with passing stats mentioned above, Nussmeier could quite easily carve them apart. And Shane has also said the last thing he'll say about Nussmeier is that it's not a lock that he declared for this year's draft, and he thinks that depending on how he performs this week combined with last week's performance, could give us the biggest indication yet if he's ready to step up to the pros, or if he decides to stay at LSU for his final year. Now, on the flip side, Kev has gone for Jalen Milroe from Alabama. And so far in 2024, Milroe has completed 137 of his 260 attempted throws for 1,937 yards. He has a 68% completion percentage, 13 passing touchdowns, 11 rushing touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and 6 fumbles. Now, when you look at him as a passer, he has a great arm and is able to throw accurately. But Milroe is another one of those great dual threat options that is able to punish you with his legs just as much as he can with his arm. He has dangerous speed, and his ability to escape pressure and break off a long run makes him unpredictable in the best kind of way. He already has 16 runs of 10 plus yards this season and 15 missed tackles forced. Now, he has struggled with decision making through poor reads and under pressure throws that have led to incompletions or worse interceptions. So it's worth bearing that in mind when watching him, that if they do tend to get pressure on him, he can panic. However, Milroe did play against LSU last year in 2023, and he will try and replicate that performance this year again, where he may have only had 219 passing yards and 0 touchdowns, but he did have 155 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns in a 42-28 win. So that is their indication as to the college prospects to keep an eye out for this weekend. Now, if we have a look at that big blue UK and Ireland tank train, and yes, I will be playing Shane's music.
Do, 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 do. Boom, boom. Do, 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 do. Boom, boom. Do, 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 do. Boom, boom.
I'm still not sure how accurate that is, but it's a cracking little remix anyway from them. Now, if we have a look on screen here at the tank train update, we can see that the New England Patriots, who are sitting at number 1 there, have Chicago up next. The Jags, who are second, have the Vikings up next. The Saints, who are third, have the Falcons up next. So 3 difficult games against teams who are pushing or in those playoff positions this early in the season, or halfway through the season, should I say. So it could be a difficult week for those 3. Now, the number 4 is Carolina Panthers, who obviously play the number 7 Giants this week in Germany. The Cleveland Browns have a bye, they're 5th, and so do the Las Vegas Raiders, and they're 6th, so there will be no change there. The Dolphins, who are 8th, have the Rams. The Tennessee Titans, who are 9th, have the Chargers. And the Jets, who are 10th, have the Cardinals. So 3 games there against teams who are kind of middle of the pack. So that is the tank train update. It will be interesting to keep an eye on those Patriots, Jags, and Saints to see how they get on against those tough oppositions. But like I said earlier in the podcast, bear in mind that we are playing first, and whoever loses between us and the Panthers will be dropping down to that number 3 spot at least before this game. Now, unfortunately, that is all we have time for this week. We will be back next Tuesday to review the Panthers game and obviously cover our time in Munich. I do appreciate everybody who watches this for bearing with us while we try and find out what we were going to do. I know this episode might have been slightly jarring, seeing just me and then a couple of interviews kind of interspliced in between the action, but we wanted to make sure we had something out, especially with this game being such a big thing this weekend for us and for international fans, especially our friends in Big Blue Germany. Now, for those who are heading out to Munich, please do make sure that you come and find us for a chat and a beer. We do have a very loose itinerary for our time there. We will be flying in on the Friday evening late, and we'll be flying back Monday late afternoon. Now, like I said, we'll be arriving Friday night and probably heading to the Hofbrau House for around about 10 p.m. Local time, and we'll be there for about an hour or two. Saturday's like the main event for a lot of the meetups. So we'll be heading back to the Hofbrauhaus around about 1 p.m. Before doing the fan march with Big Blue with Big Blue Germany. Big Blue UK and Ireland is us. To the sold out Giants House before returning around about 7 p.m. once the Giants House is finished to the Hofbrauhaus until late to meet everybody and have a few drinks and kind of relax a little. Now, Sunday is obviously game day. We will be in and around the stadium from about midday and then heading to a to be determined bar to watch Red Zone. We'll post out on socials where we're going for that. So just keep an eye out. And don't forget that our friends at the New York Giants Fans UK group on Facebook do have a messenger group that's running for the Munich trip with around 100 members in there. So it's there's a good few amount of people in there. So if you are heading to Munich, you're not part of that group, please go to the Facebook group. The link is in the description down below, and join that group to stay up to date with all the sort of latest news and goings on there. As I said already, thank you for watching or listening to this. We know it's been a slightly different episode than normal. Hopefully we'll see many of you in Munich. For those who are in Munich, obviously make sure that you follow along on the socials, and we'll be posting quite a lot on there. But until then, let's go Giants and Prost.